I drove a Porsche 911 Turbo S, midnight blue, custom leather interior. I designed the 6-bedroom mansion. It was parked in front of every beam, every window, every custom detail. At 54, I had everything a man builds toward his whole life. 3 years later, I was sitting in a studio apartment in Tacoma, designing company logos on Fiverr for $45 a pop, competing with designers in Bangladesh who'd do it for $20. Let me tell you how I got there, and more importantly, how I got out. My name is Jonathan Mitchell, John to most people. I built Mitchell Architecture from nothing, started in my garage in 1998 with a drafting table and a dream. By 2015, we were one of Seattle's top boutique firms. We designed the Westlake Office Tower, 3 luxury hotels, and half the high-end homes in Mercer Island. The firm was worth $8 million. I had 18 employees. The mayor had my personal cell number. I met Lisa at a gallery opening in 2000. She was everything I wasn't: social, connected, effortlessly charming. Her family had money, old Seattle money from timber and shipping. Her brother Nathan ran the biggest commercial real estate firm in the Pacific Northwest. At first, I thought that was a good thing. Business connections, you know. We married in 2001, had 2 kids, Sarah in 2002, Michael in 2004. Beautiful children, smart. Sarah got into Stanford. Michael was headed to NYU. I worked 80-hour weeks to give them everything. Private schools, summer camps in Switzerland, a house with a pool I designed specifically so they could have friends over. Lisa and we had what I thought was a solid marriage. We didn't fight much. She managed the social calendar, I brought in the money. We had dinner parties with the right people, took vacations to the right places. If we rarely talked about anything deeper than scheduling conflicts, well, that was what successful marriages looked like, right? You're partners. You're building something together. I was wrong about a lot of things. In January 2015, I came home early from a site visit. The contractor had COVID. This was before anyone knew what that meant, and we had to reschedule. I walked into my house, the house I'd spent 2 years designing, at 3 in the afternoon instead of 7. I heard voices from my home office, Lisa's voice, and another voice I knew, David Chen, my business partner. We'd started the firm together, 50-50 split. He handled the client relationships while I did the actual design work. For 15 years, it worked. I stood outside that office door for maybe 30 seconds. That's all it took to understand that my marriage was a lie and my business partnership was about to become a nightmare. I didn't burst in. I didn't yell. I just stood there, went numb, and walked back out to my car. I sat in that Porsche for an hour. Then I called my lawyer. Big mistake. I should have called a private investigator first. I should have documented everything. I should have been strategic. But I was angry and hurt and stupid, and I thought the law would protect me because I was the wronged party. The divorce papers were filed by the end of the week. Lisa cried, said it was a mistake, said she loved me. David offered to buy me out of the firm. I said no to both. I wanted out of the marriage, but the firm was mine. I'd built it. He'd just been along for the ride. That's when Lisa called her brother, Nathan Holloway, 6'3", Harvard MBA, the kind of guy who wore $1,000 suits and had a wine collection worth more than most people's houses. He'd always looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe. His sister married an architect, not a lawyer or a banker or someone from another old money family. I wasn't good enough. Never had been. 2 weeks after I filed for divorce, 3 of our biggest clients canceled their contracts. No explanation. Just going in a different direction. A month later, the bank that had financed our Belltown project suddenly called the loan. We had 30 days to pay back $2 million, or they'd foreclose. I scrambled, tried to get financing elsewhere. Every bank in Seattle turned me down. I found out later Nathan sat on the board of directors for 2 of them. David came to me with an offer. He'd cover the loan if I sold him my share of the company. For $300,000, my half of an $8 million firm. I laughed in his face. He just shrugged and said, "Clock's ticking, John." I tried to fight it. Got a forensic accountant, tried to prove the client cancellations were coordinated, but real estate development is all relationships and handshake deals. Nothing was in writing. Nathan's name never appeared anywhere. He was just a guy who knew a lot of people who suddenly decided they didn't want to work with Mitchell Architecture anymore. The divorce hearing was worse. Lisa's lawyers painted me as an absent workaholic who'd neglected his family for years. They had witnesses, people I thought were friends, who testified that I'd missed birthdays, anniversaries, school plays. It was all true. I had missed those things. Because I was working to pay for the life Lisa wanted, the schools she insisted on, the house she had to have. The judge awarded her the house I'd designed. Every custom detail, every hidden storage solution, every window I'd positioned to catch the morning light gone. She got primary custody too, even though the kids were 18 and 20. Michael stopped returning my calls. Sarah sent me a text. "Mom says you chose work over us. Is that true?" I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell them that I'd worked those hours so they could have everything they wanted. But how do you explain that to kids who've been told you didn't love them enough to show up? By summer 2015, I'd lost the house, lost the firm, and lost my kids. David bought me out for $300,000, barely enough to cover the divorce lawyer and back taxes. Nathan made sure everyone in Seattle architecture knew I was difficult to work with. I applied to every firm in the city. No one would hire me. I was 54, supposedly washed up, and there were younger, cheaper architects who didn't come with baggage. I moved to a studio apartment in Tacoma, 800 square feet. I could see the parking lot from my window. At night, I could hear my neighbors arguing through the walls. I'd gone from a mansion I'd designed to a box I could barely afford. I tried freelancing, set up profiles on Upwork, Fiverr, all those platforms. Experienced architect, 20-plus years, specializing in commercial and residential design. I was competing with 25-year-olds in Manila who'd work for $15 an hour. Most of my bids went unanswered. When I did get work, it was designing business cards or touching up floor plans for $50. The worst part wasn't the money, it was the invisibility. I'd been somebody, the mayor knew my name. I'd been profiled in Seattle Magazine. I'd designed buildings that changed the skyline. Now, I was just another middle-aged guy nobody wanted to hire. Too old, too expensive, too much history. I'd wake up at 6 out of habit, even though I had nowhere to go. I'd make coffee in a kitchen the size of a closet. I'd sit at a card table I'd bought at Goodwill and respond to project requests from strangers who'd ghost me after seeing my rate. By noon, I'd have made maybe $30. By dinner, I'd be eating ramen and wondering if this was how the rest of my life would look. Sarah called me once, about 6 months in. "Dad, are you okay? Michael says you're living in a bad neighborhood." I lied and said I was fine, just downsizing, keeping things simple. She didn't believe me. I could hear it in her voice. She got off the phone quickly, said she had to study. She never called again. The depression crept in slowly, not all at once, but like water filling a basement. First, you notice your shoes are wet. Then you're standing in 6 inches. Then you're swimming. I stopped shaving, stopped caring about what I wore. Some days I'd sit and stare at the wall for hours, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Was it the affair? Was it before that? Had I really been that absent? Did I deserve this? I kept a picture on my desk, the only thing I'd taken from the house. Sarah and Michael, maybe 8 and 6, at the zoo. Sarah's feeding a giraffe. Michael's laughing. I'm in the background, smiling. I remembered that day. It was one of the few Sundays I hadn't worked. Lisa had insisted. I'd been annoyed at the time I had drawings due Monday. But we'd gone, and it had been perfect. I looked at that picture every day, and wondered if that was the last time my kids had been proud to have me as their father. 2 years crawled by like that. I paid my rent. I ate. I worked my $40 projects. I watched my savings dwindle to nothing. I saw a therapist for a while until my insurance ran out. She said I had unresolved trauma and clinical depression. I said I had a shit life and a realistic view of it. We agreed to disagree. I heard through the grapevine that Lisa had married David. They had a wedding at the Four Seasons. Nathan walked her down the aisle. Sarah and Michael were in the wedding party. I saw the photos on Facebook before I blocked everyone. They looked happy. David was wearing my life like a suit that fit him better. The firm had been renamed Chen Holloway Architecture. Nathan had invested. They'd landed a contract to design the new convention center expansion, a project I'd pitched to the city 3 times and been turned down for. The article in the Seattle Times called it a bold new vision from Seattle's most exciting architecture partnership. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to burn with rage. But mostly I just felt tired, used up, like I'd run a marathon and come in last and everyone had gone home before I crossed the finish line. In March 2017, on a Tuesday that felt like every other Tuesday, I got a letter. Not email, an actual letter, thick, cream-colored paper, embossed letterhead. It was from a law firm in Zurich, Switzerland. Keller and Associates. I almost threw it away, figured it was a scam, but something made me open it. Dear Mr. Mitchell, we regret to inform you of the passing of Marcus Wilhelm Mitchell, your father. As the executor of his estate, we request your presence in Zurich for the reading of his will and transfer of assets. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange travel. I sat there with that letter in my hands for probably 10 minutes. My father, I hadn't thought about him in 40 years. He'd left when I was 5, just disappeared one day. My mother said he was a coward who'd run off to Europe and abandoned us. She'd raised me alone, worked 2 jobs, died of a heart attack when I was 30. I'd been angry at him my whole life for leaving her, leaving me. And now he was dead. And apparently he'd had some kind of estate, probably a box of old watches and some debt. But the letter was from a Swiss law firm, and Swiss law firms didn't handle estates worth nothing. I called the number. A woman with a crisp accent answered. Keller and Associates. I explained who I was. She said, "Ah, yes, Mr. Mitchell, we've been trying to locate you. Can you travel to Zurich next week? We'll arrange first-class tickets and accommodation. First-class tickets to Switzerland for an estate reading." I said yes before I could think about it. The flight was surreal. I hadn't been on a plane in 2 years, hadn't been in first class ever. The seat was bigger than my apartment's bathroom. They served real food on real plates. I kept thinking there'd been some mistake, that they'd realize I was supposed to be in coach with the other broke people. Zurich was cold and clean and expensive. Everything looked like it had been designed by someone who understood proportion and beauty. I took a cab to the law office, a 19th-century building with carved stone facades and windows that belonged in a museum. The lawyer, Herr Keller, was probably 70, silver-haired, impeccable suit. His English was perfect. He sat me down in a conference room with a view of the lake and said, "Mr. Mitchell, your father was a remarkable man. I'm sorry you didn't have the opportunity to know him." Then he showed me the documents. Marcus Mitchell, he'd kept our name, had left the United States in 1967. Not because he was a coward, because my mother's family had threatened him. My mother came from money, old Connecticut money. They didn't approve of Marcus, a working-class kid from nowhere. When she got pregnant with me, they gave him a choice: leave and never contact us again, or they'd destroy him. They had lawyers, connections, power. He was nobody. So he left, and he spent the rest of his life trying to build something to leave me. He'd moved to Switzerland, worked in a watch factory, learned the trade. By 1975, he'd started his own company small, specialty pieces, the kind of watches that take 6 months to make and cost more than cars. Mitchell timepieces. By the time he died, it was one of the most respected, independent watch manufacturers in Europe. Herr Keller slid a document across the table. Your father's estate, Mr. Mitchell. As his only child, you are the sole heir. I looked at the number, then looked again, then asked Herr Keller if there was a decimal point in the wrong place. There wasn't. $340 million, plus 62% ownership in Mitchell timepieces valued at another $200 million, plus property, a house in Zurich, an apartment in Geneva, a villa in Italy. My father, the man I'd thought abandoned me, had spent 50 years building an empire to give me. Herr Keller opened another folder. Letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to me, none ever sent. Your father tried to contact you many times, Mr. Mitchell. Your mother's family was very thorough in preventing it. He hired investigators to find you, but they were always blocked. It wasn't until your mother passed, and the family's influence waned, that he was able to confirm your location. He was preparing to contact you when his health declined. He wanted you to know he never stopped thinking of you. I read one of the letters, dated 1983, when I would have been 21. Dear Jonathan, I hope someday you'll understand why I had to leave. I hope you'll forgive me. I'm building something for you. Something that will show you that every day I was gone, I was working for your future. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. Love, Dad. I'd hated him for 49 years, and he'd loved me the whole time. I flew back to Seattle a week later. I'd spent the time in Zurich meeting with accountants, lawyers, board members. Mitchell timepieces would continue operating. I knew nothing about watches, but I'd receive quarterly dividends. The properties would be maintained. The money would be transferred to accounts I'd set up. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I moved out of the Tacoma apartment and into a hotel in downtown Seattle while I figured out my next move. I hired a private investigator, a real one this time, not the hack I'd used during the divorce. His name was Tom Reeves, former FBI, discreet as a ghost. I gave him one job: find out everything Nathan Holloway did to destroy me. Every call, every meeting, every deal. I want documentation. Tom was worth every penny of his $200,000 fee. It took him 6 weeks. He came back with a 3-inch binder. Nathan had orchestrated everything. He'd called in favors, threatened relationships, spread rumors. He'd told the bank presidents I was over-leveraged and unreliable. He'd told my clients I was difficult and potentially unstable. He'd even hired someone to file a false complaint with the state licensing board. It had been dismissed, but the damage was done. But more importantly, Tom found the cracks. Nathan's empire was built on leverage and reputation. He'd overextended himself in the 2014 market, bought properties he couldn't quite afford, taken loans from sources that wouldn't appreciate scrutiny. He'd done some creative accounting. Nothing technically illegal, but enough to embarrass him if it came out. And his biggest vulnerability, he'd just signed a $50 million deal for 3 waterfront properties, prime Seattle real estate. He'd leveraged everything to get it. If that deal fell through, his whole company would collapse. I made some calls. Turns out, when you're worth $500 million, people return your calls. I bought the mortgages on Nathan's 3 properties from the bank that held them. Cost me $32 million. Then I called the notes due. Immediately. Nathan had 30 days to pay $32 million or lose the properties. The same thing he'd done to me. Poetic, really. I heard he tried everything, called everyone he knew, called in every favor. But I'd bought the debt free and clear. There was no negotiating, no extensions. The law was very clear. On day 31, I foreclosed. Put the properties up for auction the same day. Bought them myself for $18 million. Nathan lost $14 million in equity, plus the deal he'd leveraged everything for. But I wasn't done. I hired forensic accountants to audit Nathan's company. Everything was legal. I went through the proper channels, filed the right paperwork with the SEC. When you have enough money, you can afford to do things right. They found irregularities, not enough to prosecute, probably, but enough to require investigation, enough to spook investors, enough to make his partners nervous. Within 6 months, Nathan's company was hemorrhaging clients. His partners bought him out for pennies on the dollar just to stop the bleeding. He kept his house, kept some money, but Holloway real estate was gone. 30 years of work erased. I never called him, never confronted him, never said a word. I just quietly took apart everything he'd built, the same way he'd done to me. The looks on their faces, though, that I did see. There was a charity gala in October, the Seattle Architecture Foundation, raising money for scholarships. I'd donated $1 million anonymously, so they sent me an invitation. I went. Nathan was there with his wife. Lisa was there with David. They were all smiling, working the room. Then I walked in. I'd bought a new suit, Brioni, perfectly tailored. I looked like money because I had it. Nathan saw me first. His face went white, then red. He started walking toward me, but his wife grabbed his arm. She'd seen the news. She knew what I'd done. She pulled him away. Lisa stared. Just stared. David looked like he'd seen a ghost. I didn't say anything to any of them. I just smiled, nodded, and walked to the bar. The next day, Nathan's foreclosure was announced in the business section. The article mentioned my name, properties purchased by Jonathan Mitchell, recently returned to Seattle after an inheritance abroad. They didn't know the half of it. Sarah called me the next week. "Dad, I saw your name in the paper. Is that you? Are you okay?" Her voice was tentative, like she was talking to a stranger. "I'm okay, honey. Better than okay. Can we have coffee?" We met at a place on Capitol Hill. She was 24 now, working at a tech startup, living in Fremont. She looked like her mother but had my eyes. She sat across from me and said, "Mom said you were living in Tacoma. She said you were struggling." "I was," I said. "For a while, things changed." I told her everything. The inheritance, the father I never knew, the 50 years he spent building something for me. I didn't tell her about Nathan. That wasn't her burden. She cried. "Dad, I'm so sorry," Mom said. "She said things about you, that you didn't care about us, that work was more important." "I made mistakes," I said. "I should have been there more. But I never stopped loving you. I want you to know that." We talked for 3 hours. She told me about her life, her job, her boyfriend. I told her about the years in Tacoma, the depression, the slow climb back. When we left, she hugged me. Really hugged me, not the polite pat we'd done at holidays. "Can we do this again?" she asked. "Any time you want." Michael took longer. He was angrier, more his mother's son. But Sarah worked on him, and eventually he agreed to meet. It was awkward. He didn't trust me. I didn't blame him. But we talked, and we've kept talking. It's not perfect. We're not a TV family, but we're working on it. I started a scholarship program, $5 million a year for architecture, students from broken homes or difficult backgrounds. The kids who had to work 3 jobs to get through school. The ones who didn't have trust funds or connections. I partnered with UW, MIT, and Cooper Union. We funded 50 students in the first year. One of them, a girl from Spokane whose father was in prison, just got hired at Zaha Hadid Architects in London. She sent me a card. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else would. I have it framed in my office. I bought a house. Nothing like the mansion. I don't need that anymore. A small place on Bainbridge Island, lots of windows, views of the water. I designed it myself. It's the first thing I've designed in years that's just for me. Sometimes I take the ferry into Seattle and walk past my old building. Jen Holloway Architecture is still there, but they're not doing well. Turns out David wasn't the designer. He was just the face. Without me, they're generic. The convention center project went way over budget. They're facing lawsuits. I saw David once at a coffee shop. He didn't see me. He looked tired, older. I didn't say hello. What would be the point? He made his choices. He's living with them. Lisa and Nathan lost the house, the one I designed. They downsized to a condo in Bellevue. I bought the house at auction. Not to live in, I didn't want it. But I hired a photographer to document every room, every detail I'd designed. Then, I donated it to a nonprofit that houses families transitioning out of homelessness. They were thrilled. The local news did a story. They interviewed me. I explained that houses are for living in, not for egos. The reporter asked if I knew the previous owner. I said no, I'd never met them. That was the truth. I never really knew Lisa at all. I'm 64 now, 10 years since everything fell apart. 10 years since I learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out who you really are. I spent the first 54 years of my life building things for other people. Now I build for myself and for kids who need a chance. My father's watch company is still running. I visit Zurich twice a year for board meetings. They're designing a new line, complications, they call them. Mechanical watches that show moon phases and tide charts and time zones. Completely useless in the age of smartphones. Completely beautiful. I keep one of my father's watches on my desk. It's from 1978. One of his early pieces. The case is scratched, the band is worn, but it keeps perfect time. There's an inscription on the back. For Jonathan, when he's old enough to understand, love never stops working. He was right about that. Love keeps working even when everything else stops. Even when you think you're alone. Even when you've been abandoned. Someone somewhere might be building something just for you. You just have to survive long enough to receive it. Nathan filed for bankruptcy last year. I heard through the grapevine. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just nothing. He's not my problem anymore. He never really was. He was just a man who tried to destroy me and ended up teaching me that you can't destroy someone who's already lost everything. There's a freedom in hitting bottom. You stop being afraid of the fall. I still design logos on Fiverr sometimes. Not because I need the money, but because I like helping small business owners who can't afford big agencies. Last week I did a logo for a bakery in Toledo for $50. The owner was a single mom, 3 kids, trying to make it work. The logo's probably worth $5,000 from a real agency. I gave it to her for $50 and threw in business cards for free. She cried on the phone. That's worth more than any building I ever designed. Before I go, I want to tell you something. If you're reading this, if you're going through your own version of what I went through, if someone destroyed your life, took everything, left you wondering how you'll survive tomorrow, I need you to hear this. You will survive. Not because you're strong, but because you have no choice. You'll wake up tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. And somewhere along the line, you'll realize you're still standing. The people who tried to break you will move on. They'll forget about you. And that's when you do the real work. Not revenge, that's just noise. The real work is building something new. Something they can't touch, something that's yours. I don't know what your inheritance will be. Maybe it's money, maybe it's just wisdom, maybe it's just the knowledge that you survived. But it's coming. You just have to stay alive long enough to receive it. My father spent 50 years building a legacy for a son he couldn't see. I'm spending the rest of my life building a legacy for people I'll never meet. Students who'll design buildings I'll never see. Families who'll live in houses I gave away. That's the inheritance that matters, not the money. The chance to turn your pain into someone else's hope. If you take nothing else from my story, take this. The people who try to destroy you are just clearing the path for you to discover who you really are. And who you really are is always bigger than who they tried to make you. Until next time, remember, real power isn't in dominating others. It's in outlasting them. And sometimes, the best revenge is building something so beautiful they can't help but see what they lost when they pushed you out. Stay strong, warriors. Your inheritance is coming.